Imagine having the time and money to follow your passions and live life on your own terms. Welcome to Podcasting Mastery, where you'll learn the secrets of podcasting your way to a stress-free lifestyle. Let's grab a cool tropical drink and then join James, Kimberly, and the Turtle in the Secret Beach Hut studio.
Yes, this is James Martell along with Kimberly Juchnowski.
Hello there.
And we are tucked into the Secret Beach Hut studio, and we are glad you've decided to join us today. This week, we will be continuing our conversation about developing a lifestyle business so we can all spend less time doing business and more time enjoying our families, more time traveling, and more time doing all of the things that matter to us most. It's for these reasons we focus on strategies for both developing a passive monthly income stream and passive ways of developing new clients and customers for your business. Kimberly, how you doing today?
I'm doing very well. How about yourself, James?
Very good, thank you. And I do understand that we have a very special guest on the line today.
We do indeed. Today we have Ed Keay-Smith joining us from Australia. Ed is the co-host of Business Marketing Show with Brennan Tully, and he has agreed to take us behind the scenes and talk about why they started Business Marketing Show, their show format, strategies for monetization, selecting guests, mistakes they've made, and the exact steps that they took to launch their show and grow it.
Perfect. Now, why don't you do this? Why don't you push the button, play us a little music to set the mood for the show today, and I will introduce Ed. Now, Ed is a business marketing consultant with more than 10 years of experience working with small businesses, subject matter experts, organizations, and individuals to bring targeted visitors to their websites and help them convert those visitors into customers. Ed's specialty is pay-per-click marketing, encompassing online, highly targeted advertising using services such as Google AdWords, Bing, Facebook, and LinkedIn that is researched, copy-crafted, tested, and reviewed for optimum return on investment for clients. Ed Keay-Smith, my good friend, welcome to Podcasting Mastery.
Thank you, James, and thank you, Kimberly, for having me on the show. It is a pleasure to be back in your circle of influence. We've had this conversation several times in the past about various items that we cover ourselves as a business, so thanks for having me back.
Well, and it's great to have you back on. I do know, and for our podcasting listeners, Ed and I have been friends for 11 years. And where was it that we met the first time?
Well, we actually met the first time online, which sounds really, really creepy, but we met physically for the first time in Santa Barbara in 2005 at the Commission Junction University event.
That's right.
Yeah, and I was there with my wife Lois and my daughter Sasha. She was only 7 at the time. She's now turning 18 in September
Wow.
next year. So she's she's grown up a little bit like your kids have.
Yes.
So we met there, and then we were at the Systems Seminar in 2007. We caught up again at Ken McCarthy's Systems Seminar in Chicago, which was great. And you ended up doing some speaking with them for a little while after that, I believe, as well. So that was cool. And then the last time we caught up was in 2008, which seems like a long time ago now, when we were traveling. We took some time off, took 7 months off, and we're traveling around the world, and caught up with you and spent a week with you in Vancouver. So that was lovely.
It was.
And many Skype conversations since.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that I found about the internet. It does make the world a much smaller place, and you are in, as we would call it up here, the land down under, and Skype has allowed us to communicate. And I got to say, you sound like you're in the next room.
Yes, that is quite often the case when you're talking to people. The further away they are on Skype, it seems that they sound closer. I think, I don't know why that is, but just the sound quality seems better than speaking to someone locally. So yeah, it is. The world is a smaller place. You can do business with anybody, anywhere, at any time. So it's fantastic.
Before we dig in and talk about the Business Marketing Show, take a couple minutes, if you would, and share your story with our podcasting friends.
Okay. Do you want me to go right back to when I was born, or would you like me to? I'll take it up from about just before I got involved in marketing, because I had many different careers that led up to the point of where I started in business marketing and online marketing. And I had a computer supply business from about 2001 that I ran for a couple of years. And during that time, we were using online advertising and pay-per-click advertising with Google AdWords to promote that business. And then in conversation with friends, they started to hear what I was doing and what we were using. And it got their curiosity up. And they said, look, can we have one of those ads? One of those ad things. And we said, yeah, I can help you with that. So I just did it for free, would help them set it up. And then the light bulb went off in my mind. I thought, this is really something I think I could grow. And it ended up taking over the computer business, which we ended up selling. And then purely focused on the Google AdWords side of things. And that really started growing. We were the first company in Australia to actually set up and manage campaigns for clients in 2003. So we've been in the game for quite a long time. But then that expanded because that was only me at that stage. But sort of a few years later, I partnered up with my good friend Alan Stewart, who lives in Queensland. So he's on the other side of Australia. Mm-hmm. So we've been working together for just over 10 years or so now. And we have a team of about 14 staff who are web developers and SEO people and graphic designers, etc. So we're really an agency in Australia. So we deal with mainly Australian companies. Mm-hmm. We do work with overseas companies as well. So we really sort of cover the whole gamut of keyword research, market research, web design, ad campaigns, Facebook advertising, the whole stack of things. So that's where we're up to now.
Yeah, so you've been busy over the years for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's been many facets that we keep introducing into the business because we didn't start off doing web design because we wanted to. We sort of decided to do it because we needed to, because the majority of our clients, web designers, had no clue what they were doing in terms of marketing, and they were really building websites that sort of looked nice, but they weren't converting, they weren't designed to get the sale or the lead, and weren't SEO optimized. So we would really take that over as a need, not because we really wanted to, because personally we don't really love doing websites. It's not our favourite thing. It's more you've got to have a functioning website to get the ads working and all that sort of stuff. So we decided to get into that path.
All right, so it's clear that you obviously have a lot of experience in internet marketing, so I suppose podcasting fits into this quite nicely. Do you want to talk about exactly why you started a podcast about business marketing?
Well, actually, I'll go back a little bit further as to why I started podcasting. One of the reasons I actually started podcasting was because of two influential people in my life. One was James Martell, because as we all know, James has been podcasting before the dawn of time.
Yeah.
And before electricity, I think James had a podcast.
Before podcasts.
Before, yeah, well, no one knew. When you were podcasting, it wasn't even called podcasting, I don't think. It was just a radio show or an internet radio show. It wasn't until the iPod came out that podcasting name got attached to it. So James definitely was one, but also my business partner, Alan Stewart, he had a podcast back in 2002, 2003 as well, called The Marketer's Podcast, which is still online today, themarketerspodcast.com. It's got really old stuff on there, but it's still current, and he had that running. So I was really influenced. I thought podcasting is a great way to get your message across there. It's very flexible. People can listen to it while they're driving. They can listen to it while they're exercising. So I thought, there's a really good medium here to get across. So I actually started a podcast on domain investing, which is another side that we have a strong focus on with our company, is buying and selling domain names. Mm-hmm. So I actually started one called OzDomainer. That's OzDomainer.com, OzDomainer.com. Now, that podcast still exists. It's online, but it hasn't had anything added to it for a few years. It sort of was put on pause for a while we started this other one, the Business Marketing Show. So that was where I first got started, and I look back at a lot of those podcasts and cringe, as we all do, when you look back and go, really? Was that, I'm sure I could have got it sounding better than that. But the thing is, you keep improving, you keep making the effort to do something different and to fix things that weren't as good, and it is a progression, isn't it?
It sure is. It really is. I go back and listen to my first episodes back on the Buzz, and you go, and it was hilarious actually. It's like, oh, I was bad. I was so bad. my co-host would ask me a question, I'd give him a one-word answer, or maybe two if he was lucky, and then he was like, James, you can't do that. You actually have to answer the question. Spend some time talking. I just didn't even know anything at all about how to do it. But you're right. As you get into it and you grow and you learn how to really converse with somebody else over the show properly, then it works out well. So now, Ed, business owners, they start podcasts for literally all kinds of reasons. It could be advocacy. It could be to build a personal or corporate brand. Of course, most start a podcast to generate sales and increase revenues, all kinds of reasons. So what, from a business perspective, Ed, why did you launch the Business Marketing Show?
I think ultimately the reason we launched the Business Marketing Show was for authority building. We wanted to demonstrate that we knew what we were talking about on the podcast, because the majority of the time we do have guests on the show, like we're doing now with your podcast. Mm-hmm. We do have people who come on the show who are experts in their own field and interview them for the podcast, as long as it's sort of closely related to business marketing or internet marketing. So we really did it for that reason. The second reason coming from that is the spin-off is business. We're going to get people who make inquiries, who contact us, who hear us, and we've had that happen many times where people have wanted to use us because they've heard us talking on the show, and they get to know us, like us, and trust us, which is the thing we're all trying to achieve online, is get that happening. So we would get inquiries and say, I've been listening to the podcast for 6 months, and we want to start doing some pay-per-click advertising. Can you help us? Yes, of course we can. Well, we'll have a chat first and see if you fit our, demographic of our ideal customer, and then we'll say yes. But we get an inquiry. That's the main thing. So that was one of the reasons. The other reason, which may not necessarily be thought of by a lot of people, is we keep getting asked the same questions over and over and over and over. How do I back up my WordPress website? How do I blah, 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 blah? So we thought, okay, all of these podcast episodes that we do, when someone asks us that question, we go, look, we did a podcast episode on this. Here's the link. Go and have a listen to it. And that has saved us a huge amount of interaction time with having to repeat the same message over and over. And the people love it. They think, oh, that's fantastic. And they can listen to it whenever they feel like it. They can listen to it over and over again. And there's the show notes with links. So, far better than us just trying to repeat the same thing to the people over and over. So that was another side benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing before we move on here, you mentioned business inquiries, and I've had that same experience over there. All kinds of people give you a call, say, hey, I've been listening to you for 3 months or 7 years, and we'd like to do some business with you. And what's your experience been with how warm they are, and how much closer they are to being ready to actually do business versus somebody you don't know and you're starting cold with in the relationship?
Oh, I don't think there's any comparison. I mean, I would say that someone contacting you from your podcast that's been listening to you for any length of time, it's about as close to a warm referral from someone else, I think, that you can get. Compared to someone just doing a search on Google, coming through to your website for the first time, finding you, and then making that cold inquiry, where you've got to go through that whole process of building that know you, like you, trust you scenario. I think the podcast is fantastic, and it gives you that credibility on top of that, because that's how they found you, and typically in their mind they perceive you as an authority or an expert, or however you want to classify it, because you have this show. Because as you would know, this is a big barrier to a lot of people putting up a podcast. They have so many things in their mind that's going to stop them from doing it. It's a bit like writing a book, or producing something like that, or a workshop. There's a lot of effort that goes into doing it, but it's actually really not that hard once you break it down into a step-by-step format, which is where you come in for podcasting mastery. So I to answer the question, yes, I think they're very warm and a very receptive personal business to taking the next step.
Yeah, podcasting is definitely a good way to get to know a lot of people quickly, or for a lot of people to get to know you quickly. because just the reach that it has and the personalization. So I love all of the things that you just talked about. People really need to take a look at this and and start podcasting. Sure. Really, I mean, it's good for any type of business. I'd like to actually talk about your co-host, Brendan Tully, and how did you guys get together to produce your show? What have you found to be the biggest advantages of working with a co-host? There are a lot of people who do a podcast solo. They just are out there talking, or they answer questions that come in via email or social media. So what do you think the advantages are of working with your co-host?
Okay, well, back to the original question with Brendan and I started working together in 2009, locally running workshops for small business. And we've been doing those since then, and we've had several thousand people come through the workshops in Perth. So typically they're businesses, that have sort of $500 to $2 million turnover size, $500,000 to $2 million turnover size, and they're looking to improve their internet presence. They want to learn how to do SEO or Google AdWords, etc. So they come along to these workshops. So, and Brendan is an SEO expert. His other website, or his main website, is the searchengineshop.com. That's the site that he actually runs. And he's really big in e-commerce. He has a huge amount of experience in the e-commerce side of things. So, and we complemented each other with our skill sets. So it was actually his idea. I'll give him the credit. He said, "Ed, would you like to do a podcast with me?" Because I know I'd been podcasting before. So he knew I had some experience in how to set one up. And also I think, the question about just being on your own and doing a podcast, that never really appealed to me, because the podcast I ran before Oz Domain, it was always interviewing other people. I think maybe once or twice I would speak myself. And that I just felt more comfortable in having a conversation. I think it was more interesting to people as well, having that sort of conversation aspect of a podcast rather than just the talking person, doing their thing. So that was what we decided to do, and put our skill sets together, and off we went, and just kept on chugging away. And we try to be as consistent as we possibly can. We try to get one out every week. It doesn't work out that way all the time. And then sometimes people say, "Where's your podcast?" So, it's, if you're going to do it, you really need to have a consistent plan in place, I think, to do one, whatever schedule you set. So, I mean, for us, it's weekly.
So what would you say the biggest advantages of having a co-host is to you?
The biggest advantage is you've got two minds thinking up ideas and topics together. You can bounce things off each other in the conversation. And I think it just sounds more natural to have a conversation like you would if you were at a conference. That's the thing. I tried to put it in the perspective that you go to these internet marketing events, and I think the best value happens outside of the actual workshops. I mean, you get great content from the workshops, don't get me wrong, but it's when you're standing at the bar having a conversation with someone, or two or three people, and you're in that little setting of, sometimes you're just listening into a conversation, and that's when you pick up the gold nuggets, in my opinion, of how to do things, by just a couple of people having a conversation. So that's how we try and do it. We just have a conversation like we were, standing or sitting at a bar somewhere at a conference, talking about how we do things. And hopefully the value of that comes across to the listener. So
tell us about the format for your show. How have you structured it? You said you do it weekly. What's the episode length? What type of guests are you looking for? Give us a little background on how you set up your show.
Okay, so we keep it relatively loose in terms of the subject matter. We normally, the week before or a couple of weeks ahead, we'll go, what is it that is important that we should cover now? Typically things that may be topical, that are happening in the internet marketing space. It could be something to do with a new app that's come out, or a new tool. So we'll work out a topic that we think is going to be beneficial to the listeners, and we also get feedback as well from listeners for what they would like to have. In terms of the length, we try and keep it between 30 minutes to 45 minutes. We find that's probably the maximum. Mm-hmm. If we go any longer than that, we've done a couple of episodes where we split them into two, because the content was quite deep and very long. So we know people have got a limited sort of attention span. And typically we sort of say, most people's drive to work, can be 30 minutes, sometimes 45 minutes. So that works well, and also that's a good sort of exercise period of time. So we sort of think if that's the sort of time period we can work in, then we're not going to lose a lot of people. And you still do lose people. As you know, you get a lot of people who drop off after 5 minutes or so because maybe the subject matter isn't up to them. But we think that's probably the optimum amount of time for the podcast.
And then the type of guest. So where do you find your guests, and what type of guests are you looking for?
We just find them on the street. We just walk along the street and go, guys, we've got this podcast. It's about internet marketing. What do you reckon? And they go, yeah, no problem. No, look, in all seriousness, finding the guests is not hard. I think I've probably had in 8 years of inviting people onto one of my podcasts, had one person say they didn't want to go on it.
Yeah.
Now some of the higher profile people take a bit more work. Like if you're trying to invite a Seth Godin onto your show, there's a bit more effort and time and crafting of an invite that goes into those types of high profile people to get them on your show. But if they're people you know that you've worked with before or you've met at a conference, that's why I think it's important to go to conferences, because that's where we get a lot of our guests from.
Yes.
And they have a skill set that is going to be beneficial to your listener, and in your mind you perceive them as an authority, then hey, that's the sort of guest that we would invite. And as long as it fits the podcast topic that you run. So if you're running a podcast on gardening, then you've got to find someone who's a botanist or someone who's a tree expert or whatever it is. You've got to find someone that complements that show subject that you're running. So we would then just send them out an invite and say, look, would you like to come on the podcast and talk about what you do? And very rarely does anyone say no, because it's marketing. They get to get exposure about their subject and who they are. So,
absolutely.
How is it that you prepare for each episode? Is it like a ritual? Do you do the same thing each week?
As in before the show? Yeah, there's not really much of a ritual, to be honest. It's pretty much, okay, the podcast is going to be recorded at 10 o'clock.
Show up.
At the computer. Show up. I have a rough script. I might sit down 15 minutes before with some questions that I'm going to ask. It's always the who, what, where, when, how, why, how sort of stuff. They're the basics that you would cover. But then you dig deep, and often a lot of the questions that I ask only come from the conversation progressing in the podcast, because topics pop up that the guest will bring up, and then that leads you down another path of another question that you wouldn't have had prepared because you didn't know that was coming. So we keep it pretty loose. Say like a conversation at a pub. You don't script a conversation at a pub. So we try not to overly script a conversation on the podcast. And the most important thing we try and do is have fun. I think that is one of the biggest comments we get is, you guys sound like you're having fun.
Yeah.
And the day that stops happening is the day we'll stop doing the podcast.
Yes.
Because you've got to enjoy it. You've got to have fun with the guests. Some guests are a bit, they take a bit longer to warm up. And we don't try to be overly funny, but sometimes we do. We can't help ourselves. And that's the thing with the co-host. You have that sort of rhetoric back and forth, and the occasional jab at the other person here and there, and people find that amusing, and it keeps their attention up. They think, oh, what are these guys going to do next? So
it's true. It's true. Kimberly and I give her a hard time more times than she gives me a hard time. So.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah,
you got to work on that, Kimberly. You've got to start getting back at him, because
only on the podcast. I get him in regular day-to-day life, so it's okay.
No, well, it's actually that's okay, but at least the podcast is recorded and goes out to thousands. So I think I am actually winning in that area. And I've been reminding listeners that she just turned 30, and she's a little bit tender about that at the moment.
Actually, you can keep saying that because it's past that point now.
So I've learned that business owners who are considering starting a podcast, they have this worry, and they wonder, do I have enough episodes or enough topics to cover? What's been your experience in selecting topics?
I really think it's only limited to your imagination, personally. We've never had any problems with topics, because you can really niche into a specific topic and really dig down deep into that subject. So I think, look, it does depend on the market you're in and what you're doing and what the subject of your podcast is. With some, there may be limits to what they can talk about. But I really think in any industry, if you start looking at all the spread of information that covers that topic, then you can talk about anything, really. So I think it's just really limited to your imagination. And people who are going and starting a podcast for the first time naturally have some tendency. They're very maybe conscious about what they sound like on a podcast, this has been the biggest blocker. Like most of my family, they just look at me like I've got three heads when I talk about that. Then I do a podcast, and then I'm actually recording my voice. And I know my sisters will never listen to this, so I'm safe to say it. But two of my sisters actually have their husbands record their voicemail message on their phone for them because they're so, shy about having their voice recorded. So, and there's a lot of people out there who are like that, unfortunately. So they will probably never go and do a podcast because that's always blocking them, which is a real shame because they have a lot of information and very specific information that they can share. And doing that, in interviewing other people as well, there's a lot that's actually getting left unsaid.
It's funny because we just talked about that in a previous episode and how it doesn't matter what you sound like, just do it anyways. Nobody cares. Only you care what you sound like.
This is it, and it is none of my business what people think of me. So I actually look back and I listen to my voice and I go, is that what I really sound like? Is that what people have to put up with, is listening to that voice? And I have been told that I do have a pretty good voice for radio, so whether that's true or not, I don't know.
You sound great. It's perfect.
Well, thank you, Kimberly.
I can see that we're coming up to a break. I'm sorry to cut you off, but
That's okay.
We will be right back. For everybody who's tuning in, we are speaking with Ed Keay-Smith, co-host of Business Marketing Show, and when we return, we'll ask Ed about their strategy for building an audience, so don't go away.
More Podcasting Mastery with James and Kimberly from the Secret Beach Hut Studio after this.
Is your website out of date? Is it mobile friendly? Why not let us design your website and we'll make sure it looks the way it should on all platforms and devices, including iPhones, iPads, and other smartphones and tablets. We'll even optimize your site for search engines and make it easy for you to share your content and products on social sites such as Facebook and Twitter with built-in sharing features. For more information and to schedule your no-obligation free consultation, go to podcastingmastery.com/website. Once again, that's www.podcastingmastery.com/website.
Would you love to spend less time doing business and more time enjoying your family, more time traveling, and more time doing all of the things that matter to you most? Whether you're looking to develop a passive monthly income stream or you're looking for passive ways of generating new clients and customers for your business, James Martell's free podcasting webinar is the place to start. James Martell, an 11-year podcasting veteran, will show you how to quickly and easily launch a podcast that will impress all who hear it to attract all of the clients and customers you need, and how to do it all in less than 1 hour a week using equipment you already own. Register now for this lifestyle and business-changing webinar at podcastingmastery.com/webinar. We'll see you there. Once again, that's www.podcastingmastery.com/webinar.
When James Martell launched his affiliate Buzz podcast in the spring of 2003, he never dreamed he'd be sitting here all these years later with over 3 million downloads and 400-plus episodes. He gets thousands of listeners tuning in each week, but it wasn't always like that. In the beginning, he had to figure things out on his own. There were no books or guides available, so there was a lot of trial and error. And while there are many pieces to the puzzle for constructing a successful podcast, James Martell has boiled it down to the 12 core elements of the No Fail podcast in his most recent free report. Available for a limited time at podcastingmastery.com/no-fail.
Now back to Podcasting Mastery from the Secret Beach Hut Studio.
Yes, and we're back. I'm here with my co-host, James Martell, and our special guest today, Ed Keay-Smith, co-host of Business Marketing Show. Ed, let's continue this conversation and talk about maybe what are some of the other not-so-obvious advantages you have found to having your own show?
The not so obvious advantages, I think, was definitely one that I mentioned before in utilising the content for clients that we have, so they can go and listen to it without us having to keep repeating ourselves. Look, in terms of monetizing, we sort of were a bit weird in that way, because a lot of people who start a podcast, one of the goals I think is to make money from the actual podcast itself directly, in terms of advertising revenue, sponsorship, affiliate links, etc. And we never really did it for that reason. We have been starting to get approached by people who want to do that, but we really were a little bit purist in that sense. We wanted to keep complete control and didn't want to have our advertisers influencing what we would say or do. So the way we would monetize it is by, promoting who we are, promoting that we provide services, and then people come to us to get those services from us. So that's really the best way we would find to monetize it for this particular podcast.
So what's your experience been with the launch of your show? And I guess more specifically, how are you building your audience?
Okay, we certainly are using social media. We have found that we get a lot of traffic through various services like SoundCloud and Stitcher. We're getting a lot of people listening in on that. We always publicise our podcasts through Facebook and through our connections. Another area that, even though we don't do a video recording, like we don't have talking heads on our podcast, we're just purely audio. Mm-hmm. We always put our audio through YouTube as well. So we actually, when you go onto the site, you'll see there's a big sort of YouTube video play button, but it's actually only audio. So we have a lot of people who subscribe and follow us on YouTube, even though it's not a video. And a lot of people don't think of YouTube as a source of audio. So that's another place that we get quite a decent amount of traction from, and have listeners that purely just listen to it on YouTube.
So why do you think podcasting is such a solid approach to marketing a business online?
Well, I think it is something you can create once, and then that message is there for as long as you've got it publicised on the internet. People can listen to it anytime they like. So, I'm living in Perth. I can have people who are listening to it across the other side of the country, which is often 2 or 3 hours difference. They could be listening to it at midnight, and the work that I put in that one recording session is now paying dividends multiple times over. So there's that ongoing repetitive stream of marketing that's happening from the podcast that's working 24/7, that I can't be there doing that and talking to those people at all hours of the day and night. So the podcast is there doing that for us. It's our sort of business representative 24/7. So in that sense, it is leveraging our time very effectively.
I think it's worth mentioning too, because you were talking about how you add it to YouTube and SoundCloud and Stitcher, all these different platforms. One podcast can create so many different pieces of content. Just spreads you out all over online. So I think it's important to add that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Where would we find your podcast? Name the various locations that somebody could find your show, because that's a very good point, Kimberly.
Well, they can certainly find it on iTunes. So typing in Business Marketing Show, you'll get it on iTunes. That's the URL of the show is businessmarketingshow.com.
Okay, that's the second place they can find it. Okay.
That's the second. Yep. SoundCloud.
3.
SoundCloud and Stitcher is the main one. So
that's
we're looking
4.
we're looking at expanding in other areas, and there's probably going to be YouTube as well. So there
5.
You go. So that's
okay. And then how about Facebook?
Oh yeah, Facebook. Yeah,
6.
That's 6. Yeah. Facebook, LinkedIn. It's on
7.
LinkedIn because we post it on there. Where else is it? Well, we email it out to people, so
8.
technically it's 8.
Yeah.
RSS feed, so
9.
people subscribe to 9.
Yeah.
One
more.
Come on. Oh, I've got to push that last rep out.
How about Twitter?
No, we fail on Twitter. Sorry.
Okay.
We're terrible Twitter users.
Okay.
But we should improve on that. I'm thinking if there's one more spot. Blueberry. It's listed on Blueberry, the podcast.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So that's a good
10 pieces of content from a single podcast episode every single time.
Yeah, look, that's right. I haven't thought of it in that way before, so hence why you guys are the podcast experts, and I am learning from you by being on the show. So that's why people should come on your show.
Big online footprint. So.
Yeah, and look, there's other areas we know we haven't even tapped into yet, and I know you guys across different services as well. What are some of the ones you use?
All of the ones that you mentioned for sure.
Plus Spreaker is amazing.
Spreaker, that was one. Yeah, we've got to get on that. So.
Okay, Spreaker,
Blog Talk Radio,
iHeartRadio, I love. Yeah. It's great. iHeartRadio is 240 million monthly listeners streaming into the cars. So
iHeartRadio,
yeah, that's been fabulous. And actually, if you submit your podcast to Spreaker, that's how you actually get into iHeartRadio. There's a little button that you could push if you want to apply to them to have your show in it. And with the buzz, we have the affiliate buzz in there, and it's great. There's lots of traffic comes from iHeartRadio. So, but let me ask you: we're talking about all the things that are working. What mistakes have you made along the way?
Oh, plenty. I'm just trying to think, what they are. I think one of the mistakes we made early on was not being consistent. We didn't do the podcast as often as we should have done. But I think people need to retain that ongoing connection with you. And if you have too many gaps between when you put out content, they can sometimes drop off. We certainly... have improved the introductions and things we do now on how we do it. We're a little bit rough around the edges in the beginning. We have more of a set sequence that we do things now. What else would we do? Probably quality of the sound was not that good. We've tried to improve that as well, because I think if you're going to have a podcast that people are just an audio podcast, not a video podcast, then the quality of the recordings need to be as good as possible. That being said, I do listen to some podcasts that the sound quality is really, really bad, but the content is really, really awesome. So I still listen to it regardless of that, but you may lose some people because of the sound quality. So those are some of the areas I think we keep trying to improve on. And the other thing that we're sorting out now, because the initial website that we put up, we sort of threw it together a little bit, and it's still the same one that we put together. It works well, but we actually used the same template that was available for a WordPress template for the podcast that was used by I Love Marketing. So we thought, good enough for them, good enough for the guys at I Love Marketing, Dean Jackson and had a mental blank on his co-host, Joe Polish. Sorry, Joe. So we used a similar sort of theme to that, but we're currently going to be updating that to a more sort of modern template.
So if you had to... Sorry to cut you off there. Go ahead.
All right. That's all right. No, you go. It's okay.
If you had to start all over, what would you do differently?
Those things that I mentioned would probably get sorted to begin with. I think that's important to have a bit more of a strategy as well. We sort of really didn't have a plan of what we were going to be doing. We went into it a little bit loose and didn't have any real major structure. We didn't actually start inviting guests on the show until probably 20 episodes in. It was really just Brendan and I talking, which was fine, but I think having guests to me is a much wiser move for a podcast, because it's not just the one person that is trying to attract the listener, because people want to listen to different people talking about different subjects, and just the one person all the time I don't think it's great. So having guests on earlier I think would have been a better move.
Great advice.
Bring some diversity into the conversation.
Absolutely, because although I am fascinating and people love listening to me, there's only so much Ed that one person can handle.
Lois has told me all about that.
Yeah, that's it. So you've got to have different people on, and I think that's what makes it exciting. You guys are going, what's this weird Australian dude? He's just crazy. We can't have any more Australians on the show. It's upsetting our status quo.
No,
So-
we'll get your co-host on next. We need more. More
Yeah,
Australians.
yeah. Oh, he'll happily come on.
So let's shift gears here. Let's get into this is the unscripted, unannounced. You don't know about this speed round. So some quick questions for you. 10 of them in total.
Oh,
And we start off with simple number 1. Windows or Mac?
Mac for sure.
Man, I'm really
Oh,
losing.
for 2.
I know.
Used to be Windows, and never was going to go to Mac. But once you go Mac, you can't go back.
Oh, you've gone to the dark side. All right, so which probably answers my next question. iPhone or Android?
Definitely iPhone, and there's a very, very positive reason for that, because people with iPhones, and I can statistically prove this, are actually the ones that spend money on the internet. It's true.
Okay. Really?
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. I can go through all my analytics of people that spend money with our clients.
Okay.
Majority of the time are the ones with iPhones. Sorry
Really?
to upset those Android. Yes, absolutely.
They're easier
Yeah.
to sell to, that's all.
They have a higher disposable income. It's true.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep.
I'm not gonna argue with
Interesting.
the
Well, the
marketing guy
comments
from
are coming in
Aussie.
now.
Yeah,
The
no,
comments.
So
See
okay,
the Android.
yeah. Oh, I'm thinking I buy a lot of stuff online. I got an Android, so Number 3, cat or dog person?
Definitely a dog person. Yeah, we love our pooches. I used to have cats. Funnily enough, my first pets were cats, but yeah, we're definitely dogs.
Most recently read book?
Most recently read book would be Content Engine by Dan Norris.
Okay, so this will be a fun one because, as you mentioned, you dropped down into Vancouver on your 7-month trip. So, what is your favorite vacation spot or the favorite place you've seen during your trip?
And that's universal across the family. So this is not just me. This is me, Lois, and Sasha.
Okay.
In Tuscany, in Italy, a little town called Barga. 10,000 population, one of the most idyllic, beautiful Italian countryside places you could ever picture in your mind. So,
No, we have to look that up.
Barga, Italy, Barga, Barga.
Are you a techie or a non-techie?
I'm definitely a techie.
There you go.
Yeah. I look after all the tech in the house, and people come to me when there's technical issues, and I had a computer supply business. So definitely a techie.
All right. Favorite success quote?
Favorite success quote?
This is always a tough one.
Success quote. Far out. That is a tough one because I have so many. It's one by Helen Keller. Life is a daring adventure or nothing at all.
Good one.
I like that.
I think I paraphrased that slightly. It may not be exactly what Helen Keller said, but it was something to that degree.
Yeah. What is a tool that you use every day that you would hate to live without?
Oh, that is so easy. LastPass.
LastPass.
That's a good one.
Yeah. My password and form filling in tool on my phone, on my computer. It's a password management tool.
I'm going to have to have a
Every
look
time.
at that.
Every time
Yeah.
I'm at a conference, people tell me about LastPass. I don't know what I would
Yeah.
do without LastPass. I hear this all the time.
Yep, LASTPASS.com.
Well, and it's
So
definitely one of the biggest problems people have online, too, is managing their passcodes.
Oh, look, it's fantastic, and I've been using it. I used to use another one called RoboForm, but I switched to LastPass about 5 years ago and have found it much easier to use because I have about 800 different sites and passwords I go into, and
Yep.
couldn't do without that one.
Nope, definitely not. Number 9. What do you do for fun? What does Ed Keay-Smith do for fun?
I am a rock and roll drummer. So
Are you?
I play in yes.
Are you serious?
Yes, yeah. I thought you knew that, James.
Interesting.
Yeah. I play in a band. We play things like Led Zeppelin and AC/DC
Nice.
No, holding
all
on to me,
those
buddy.
sorts. No, sorry. I've been playing since I got started really late. I started when I was about 34, playing the drums. But yeah, I've got 2 different drum kits, an acoustic set, which is the very noisy one, which I'm not allowed to play in the house, and then I have Yamaha electronic kit, which I put my earphones on. I can play at 2 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't upset anyone. And we do gigs around town. We do weddings and parties and things like that.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yep.
Okay, number 10, last one. What is the most rewarding thing you've been able to do for someone because of your podcast? Maybe they found you on your podcast, or just generally because of your podcast.
I think it was helping someone get started in the domain investing business, funnily enough. And they've gone on to do very, very well. And they initially got started by listening to things I was talking about, little old me, that sparked their interest. And I think that's the thing you've always got to be wary of. The things you say online can affect people in quite profound ways, and they can pick up messages and it gets them on a path. So be careful the path you're putting people on, because hopefully it's a good one. But yeah, so that was probably something that's really was quite good to see happen. So
now I've of course encouraged listeners to check out and subscribe to the Business Marketing Show at businessmarketingshow.com, and of course on iTunes. So once again, that's businessmarketingshow.com. Ed, any final thoughts or words of encouragement to other podcasters?
Well, to other podcasters, don't stop. I think the average podcast goes for about 7 episodes before people quit, from my understanding and my research. So don't quit. Just you keep putting one foot in front of the other. You're going to fail. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to do stupid things. You're going to just stuff things up. You're going to record whole episodes of podcasts and then realise you didn't actually record the whole episode of the podcast. That was one thing I forgot to mention earlier in things I've done. So these things will happen, but that's what sorts out the winners from the losers. So you got to keep going, and don't stop. And if you're thinking of actually starting a podcast, stop thinking about it and just do it. Because another year will go past and it'll be Christmas again. You'll go, gee, I really wish I'd started that podcast. And so many things could have happened because of that podcast if you'd only just taken that next step. So just do it, as the Nike commercial says.
Ed, thanks so much for joining us today, sharing your story, and being so generous with sharing your podcasting knowledge and experience. Is greatly appreciated.
Thank you, James, and thank you, Kimberly, for having me on.
And to our podcasting friends, a reminder that if you have your own podcast or podcasting tool that you want us to feature here on the show, simply send us the details to feature me at podcastingmastery.com, and we may do exactly that. And if you're wondering what it takes to develop a profitable podcast of your own, James has put together a very special report, The Core Elements of a No-Fail Podcast. You can download it for free for a limited time at podcastingmastery.com/no-fail.
In addition, if there's something we mentioned here that you missed, keep in mind we do keep all the notes for you, including links to the Business Marketing Show, and you can find the show notes for this episode at podcastingmastery.com/013. Kimberly, thanks so much. Ed, you're awesome. And to all our podcasting friends, we'll catch you on the next episode of the Podcasting Mastery Podcast right here from the Secret Beach Hut Studio.
Thanks for joining us in the Secret Beach Hut Studio. If you are ready to start your podcasting adventure and to learn the secrets of creating a profitable podcast, James Martell has boiled it down for you to the 12 core elements of the No-Fail Podcast in his most recent free report. Available for a limited time at podcastingmastery.com/no-fail. But don't wait, this report won't be free for long. So be sure to grab your free copy today to learn the secrets of podcasting your way to a stress-free lifestyle at podcastingmastery.com/no-fail.